Oh, this is gonna be crazy. That was great. Alright, hello everyone, and welcome today to another episode of Spraynpray1000's Verdict, featuring me, Spraynpray1000. And today, in this episode, we are going to take a closer look at the latest game in the Metal Gear franchise, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, which was recently released February 19th, 2013. Alright? Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is a drastically different game than its predecessors, namely the fact that the game is no longer pure stealth, okay, or a stealth-based game. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is actually more similar to a game like Devil May Cry or God of War or Afro Samurai, to be more precise, because it has a lot of similarities with that game, in that it's more of a hack and slash game than actual stealth. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some stealth segments in the game, but the majority of the action in the game is going to be very similar to Metal Gear Rising, very similar to Devil May Cry, in the sense that the action is about using combos, trying not to get hit, using your special abilities to chain together enemies and just dominate the battlefield using very wide moves and very strong attacks. And for the most part, let's get down into the critique of it. For the most part, it actually plays really well. You know, Platinum Games, they've made a lot of these kind of games. The last one I can think of is Anarchy Reigns and Bayonetta. So they definitely know what they're doing in this department, you know, with the gameplay. So they have this down, they have that hammered down pack. So that there's no problem with that. For the combat flows very nicely. There's your quick attacks. There's your strong attacks, which actually can be substituted out for other various weapons that you pick up during the course of the story. I believe one is a polearm, another is a sai, or like a Japanese knife. You get to use those, and the final one is a bunch of two blades. I forget what they actually were, because I only ended up using the polearm because it was too expensive to level up the other weapons. But for the most part, you have your strong attacks, your light attacks. You can parry. The parrying in this game is simply whenever someone's about to do an attack, they either don't glow, they glow red, or they glow yellow. And you can parry red attacks, okay? And just to simply parry, you just push the stick towards the person that's parrying, and then you just press the attack button, the X button, and you'll automatically block it. And if you time it right, you can actually leave them vulnerable to a counterattack. And if not, you'll probably deflect them, and you won't take any damage, but you'll push them back, which is, you know, it's not as easy to counterattack in that scenario. And you can pretty much parry just about any enemy in the game, which is kind of cool that, you know, you can do that. Of course, some enemies have unblockable attacks, in which case they shine yellow. So you just have to either dodge that. There is a dodge maneuver in the game. I initially did not know there was a dodge maneuver. I do not remember the game telling me that there was a dodge maneuver, but it does exist in the game. It's the attack button and the jump button when you're near an enemy that's about to attack. So you do have a little bit of leeway with how you can avoid damage in this game. But you can also run away too. That's pretty cool. You just immediately just run away to avoid an attack. And in some cases, that's actually more effective, especially if the attack is going to take up a lot of space and you can't really dodge it properly, because all the dodge does is really circle you around the enemy rather than dodge you back in a direction of your choosing. And for the most part, the swordplay is really well defined. Now, for those of you who don't know this game's developmental history, the reason why this game was initially going to be something very completely different is that they wanted to make it so that Raiden, the main character, could slash through anything in the environment with relative ease, and it would, you know, accurately display where the slash marks were. And Kojima Productions could not basically get that to work. And that was, they wanted that to be such a major part of the game that they said, wow, we don't know what we're going to do with this game. We don't know if we can pull it off. And so the game kind of fell by a little bit by the wayside, and then Platinum Games and I was about to say Ninja Theory because of Devil May Cry, but Platinum Games and Kojima worked with each other on it. You know, we all know Platinum Games is well renowned for their beat 'em ups and hack and slashers, so they definitely knew what they were doing. Kojima Productions still maintained the story and all the settings and stuff. They just worked on the gameplay, and the sword play is really well defined in this game. For example, when you slash you know, a box or something, where Raiden's sword travels actually is reflected on the box, and the part of that box will be cut off instead of, you know, just in most games how whenever you slash something, it splits along a certain fault line that's already predefined. And it's really cool because you can basically chop up stuff in a tiny little itty bitty pieces, okay? And it's that just adds to the awesomeness that they would do this. It's just such a cool little gimmick in the game that, oh, hold on, I'm messing with my headset, I'm getting a text. And it's just, I just thought that was really well done, okay? The other thing is there's also a new, a sort of blade mode, okay? Now, here's where I draw so many parallels between this game and Afro Samurai, okay? The Afro Samurai video game is what I'm talking about. Basically, whenever you pull left trigger, or I don't know what it is on PS3, you enter blade mode, which is where Raiden plants his feet, and he basically draws his sword, and he prepares to slash up enemies, or whatever's in front of him. And in this mode, rather than using the X or Y button to attack, which you still can, the main focus is on using the control stick in order to hack and slash stuff along the direction that you're pushing the stick. Okay, and I think it's very helpful not only, you know, just to explore the environment, but it's also very helpful when you're fighting enemies. And another thing about it is that it also slows time if you have enough focus in your focus meter. And I think that, you know, well, I think that's, you know, obviously they have to have some kind of drawback to it. The focus meter will deplete as you stay in this blade mode. But while in this blade mode, basically Raiden can attack very fast, you know, he can slash stuff up very quickly. And as I was saying before, you can, you know, split stuff into, you can split boxes and stuff in the environment up to into hundreds of pieces. Not only that, you can also hack up enemies like that, okay? Enemies will also be able to be hacked up into multiple pieces similar to that. So let's say you have an enemy who's weak, and by the way, you can, you know, this game, you can take off limbs off the enemies to obviously reduce their combat capabilities, and it's just very well done with that. You can basically strategically dismember the enemies, and in this blade mode, whenever an enemy's, you know, limb is able to be detached after they've taken so much damage, you can it glows blue on their body, and you can see that when you're in blade mode, and you can say, okay, I'm going to take the legs off this guy, okay? And so I think that works very nicely. So all in all, the gameplay of this game is really well done. Now, similar to Devil May Cry, you also level your stuff up by using BP. I forget what it stands for, battle points or something. BP is sort of like the experience of the game. At the end of each level, you have the option to buy more points, and you'll have the option to like level your stuff up, increase your sword damage, increase Raiden's health, increase all that other stuff. Very, very similar system to we've seen a million other times. On top of that, what else is there? But the thing is, and there's also quick time events and whatnot, so it's all pretty similar to other beat 'em ups we've played. The problem is, though, in this game, what happens is that it's pretty short, okay? That's my one problem with this game, okay? I said the same thing about the Devil May Cry 2013 that came out in January, excuse me. I said the same thing pretty much about it. It's very short, it's very concise. This game, unlike Devil May Cry, well, the missions are longer, like some are hours, well, not hours, but like an hour or so long. The last like 3 or 4 missions of the game are pretty short, okay? And now there are virtual reality missions, VR missions, similar to other Metal Gear games. I didn't get a chance to play those. I'll come back and play them eventually. But the thing about that is the main story, okay? The story is very short. And that's not to say it's not good. It's very well polished for what's there. It certainly doesn't overstay its welcome. But it's just, to me, I get the feeling like it could have been longer. Like it could have been, instead of, you know, 7 missions, or is it 7 or 8 missions, it could have been like 10 or 12. I'm not saying they had to pull a Devil May Cry where it has to be 20 missions or something like that. but it just to me feels like the game was too short. The story was very, very short and sweet, and in that regard, it could have been slightly better. Okay. Now, the other thing about this game is whenever you're basically, oh, well, now I forget what I was going to say. So, damn it, I actually really forgot what I was about to say about the story. But in any event, let's move on to basically a quick synopsis of the story, okay? Now, while I try to remember that. The story of this game takes place after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4, okay? Several years after that. And while the story is set in the same universe and, the same continuity, it is almost basically not related to the other Metal Gear games in any way other than, setting and a few characters. So, you're not going to see some of your favorite characters from the other games. You will see a couple of them. They'll make cameo appearances. But for the most part, there's a whole new lineup of people waiting to jump into the action and, add to the story. Now, I like the characters. I think the diversity of characters was good. Raiden makes a reappearance as the main character instead of, although he was kind of the main character of Metal Gear Solid 2, he wasn't the only playable. And for the most part, the game also heavily revolved around Solid Snake. In Metal Gear Solid 4, he was a side character. I don't know why I just mentioned that. But in Metal Gear Rising, excuse me, he is the only character, and he's the main star of the show. So it's good to see Raiden as the main star, because the story definitely takes a more interesting turn, because as I said, Raiden is a different person than Snake. Raiden has a whole different backstory. In fact, his backstory is very deep. It was, expanded upon to no end in the endless cutscenes of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4. But here it's there, and we actually get to see a little bit more of his character develop, which I thought was pretty cool. That Raiden's actually, it's not just that, this is a side game. This is Raiden's story, It's that I thought they did a very good job of handling that. And we all know Kojima Productions and their story is just ridiculous. That relationship is like unparalleled. So, for the most part, I like the story. What I didn't like about the story, some of the aspects of it, were the fact that a lot of the side characters don't really have much of a say in the game. They really don't have much of an appearance, and they're really just not, in there. They don't say much. They don't contribute. One of the main helpers, Boris, is, a big help in Raiden's side. There's also the Doctor, the cast of Raiden's mercenary crew is very, very diverse. You have the Russian Boris, the German Doctor. Then you have, what was the black guy's name? I don't remember. Washington something. Kevin Washington is your black guy. And then you have I forget the chick's name because she only spoke twice in the entire game. But you have your diverse crew of people helping Raiden out along the mission. The codec calls return. But the other thing is, this game has a surprising amount of action and very few cutscenes, unlike the other Metal Gear games, which had a great deal of cutscenes. Especially Metal Gear Solid 4. They had ridiculous amounts of cutscenes, and, the gameplay was pretty simple. Now, in this game, you have a lot of, the gameplay is obviously that of a beat-em-up. So there's combos to learn, there's all this stuff to memorize, and it's definitely, the cutscenes are, like, gone. Well, not all gone, but they're there, and it might be because the game is definitely a lot shorter than other Metal Gear games, but, for the amount that there is, the cutscene to gameplay proportion is now ridiculous. It's changed completely. And I guess that's why, a lot of the characters don't really make much of an appearance or something, but for the most part, I like it, and at the same time, it feels weird that this is a Metal Gear game with so few cutscenes. But that's subjective. Some people have been waiting a while for a game like this, and I won't take points off for it. Obviously, it's just a different taste in my mouth. Now, the graphics are good. I think that's all I'm going to say about the graphics. We already know I don't care about graphics at this point. Graphics are okay. They're fine, and that's all I'm going to say about them. Now, the soundtrack is very, very good. I like the soundtrack. The soundtrack is, similar to most other beat-em-ups and hack-and-slash games like Devil May Cry. The soundtrack is, upbeat. It's supposed to be energetic. They have a lot of remixed rock songs, and I thought it was very good. It was very, the soundtrack wasn't too obnoxiously annoying, and it wasn't, too passive. It was right on the edge. It was good. Similar to a game like Afro Samurai, and of course, I keep drawing parallels because this game, if you've played Afro Samurai, there's a lot in that game that appears in this game, okay? And I have to say that it almost feels like a little bit of idea sharing. So I don't know if there's any behind the scenes work with that or how that worked out, but at least the soundtrack is good for what there is. So all in all, I have to say I am very impressed with this game. The story is definitely gripping. It's interesting. You'll want to play it through to the end. The boss fights in the game, though, I should say, the boss fights are very epic. I love them a lot, okay? They're very epic. They're, you were kind of waiting for them. And the weird thing about it, though, is that the bosses don't really they do have a story behind them, but they don't, they don't elaborate on it, as I said before, like other Metal Gear games. And now it just feels, it's the weird feeling of playing 6 Metal Gear games, where they do this basically the same thing for 6 games in a row, and then they change the formula. I'm kind of not expecting that from them. That was kind of a weird design choice, and so regardless of that, the bosses are still good. Bosses typically in a lot of these games are either hit or miss. They're either very well done or they're just exceptionally bad or subpar. But what do we have here? We have a good game that plays very well thought out because of, the fact that it's a collaboration between 2 very well done game developers. And it's hard to find stuff bad about this game. It's like they definitely did a decent job of trying to diversify the gameplay. It's not always hack and slash. There's some segments where you're like you're flying on something and you're controlling it, or you're running up and down shit, and it's quick time events and you gotta be on your edge, and the blade mode gets mixed in with that, and it's very diverse. It's just the only thing is that I wish there was more. Okay, not just a longer story, but something else to it. For what there is, it's good, but it's not enough. You know what I mean? It's not a full feast. It's more like a 1 plate's worth of food. It's good. It'll get you through it. It's worth looking into. It's worth checking out. It's well done, but at the same time, it wasn't all in all very well wrapped up. Especially some of the things that left a bad taste in my mouth while I'm talking about the length of the game was the final boss, which I thought was just very inconsistent. And some of the worst of the game really came out in the final boss. Not story-wise, but more gameplay-wise. For example, in battle, what happens is that you have the ability to heal by slashing up enemies, okay? And then once they're basically low on health, the screen will flash blue. And then you have the ability to chop them up using blade mode. And then if you're directing your chops well enough, you can actually reach in. Raiden will reach in, grab the dude's I forget what it is, electrolyte pack, and rip it out and squish it in his hand, and he'll regain full health and and focus mode. Okay, which is good. I like that a lot. You can fully heal. A lot of these games, it's very hard to recover health once you get hit in a hack and slash. Devil May Cry penalizes you for healing. And all these other games, it's very hard to recover health. But in this game, that function is good, and it's easy enough to execute that new players are going to enjoy it. People who aren't that great with beat 'em ups, they're going to enjoy it. They're going to feel right at home with it, and it's not too hard to do once you get it down. To the point that it almost makes the game a little bit too easy, where if you know how to do it, you can pretty much almost always pull it off against enemies. Now, the other thing is that for the final boss, there's no way to really recover health, and let me explain. Now, in the final boss, he's tough, okay? Yeah, he's a tough boss. He has a lot of moves that do like 25% damage. Now, in this game, there's the blade mode works, okay? But in the final boss, it kind of was messed up, and I'll explain that. Now, when you enter blade mode, the thing is, one stick controls where Raiden actually swings the free blade, and the other stick controls the camera, so you can turn to slash multiple people. In this game mode, or in the final boss, the camera was, jumping all around. It was not consistent. The other thing is that, and while part of this might be my stick, it's very hard to properly execute the blade mode because the way that they expect you to do it is to pull the stick in one direction and then release it, and Raiden will fling the blade starting from wherever you pulled the stick up to the other side where the stick was opposite. Now, in this day and age, no fucking controller is going to be that okay that will always come out. So what I did for the most part, which I wasn't penalized for at all up until the final boss, was whenever I was doing a hack and slash mode, I would pull the stick one way and then pull it across my stealth, which works. It's fine, which is a good, it's a good scenario. It's a good strategy. But in the final boss, there's parts where you have to be very precise with your aiming. So while you might line up, you know, all the stuff you need to slash with one swipe and then release it, and pull it across, what they want you to do is release it so it's just a clean, you know, motion going across. But you see, no stick does that. Sticks don't do that. Sticks get broken, sticks get crooked, and sticks do not return to the default position time and time again. So what ends up happening is you'll end up missing that target, and in that final boss, that's pretty much a fatal mistake. Okay, you have to be flawless there, which in my opinion, I have to take some points off for that, because that, you know, that kind of made me had to redo the entire boss fight several times in a row. Now, if I were to try and pull it across myself, I'm not exactly as precise that I can pull a stick down and then completely in a very swift motion pull it across to the other side, because if you're not swift enough, Raiden is just going to readjust his blade, which isn't what you want. You want him to slash. So for me, maybe blade mode would have been a bit better executed if you could just press a button after lining it up, and then that would reset it, okay? Now, that's the other thing about it, though. That's kind of a cumbersome task, where if I had to pull it across, I have to make sure that's completely equal, you know, that I don't accidentally swipe it the wrong way. So in that one scenario, which just so happens to be the final boss, blade mode does kind of get messed up a bit. It doesn't work as it should. For the most part, though, you'll probably breeze through the story. Well, you won't breeze through it, but you're gonna play through the story. You won't have a problem with it, okay? So ultimately, what do I say about Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance? Good story. Taking a different spin on the Metal Gear universe. Lack of cutscenes, but it's all still the same well-designed story. The gameplay has it's very good, very up. There's some downs to it, some stuff that, you know, is obviously the tweaks about it that could have been done, but it's very hard to find stuff bad to say about this game other than its length and that the blade mode sometimes doesn't work properly. What else? The soundtrack, very good. I thought it was, you know, it really did blend in with the action of the game. It's, you know, it's an action-y game. They want you to constantly, you know, be excited and energetic, so that was good. And ultimately, what would I give this game? I think that for Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, because of all the unique stuff they did, all the awesome stuff they did in the game, this game deserves a 92. Okay, this game on a scale of 100, because I know a lot of people ask me that, like, you know, I say 92, it's like, oh, what scale is that out of? I wonder. But I'll give Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance a 92, okay, with points basically being the fact that the game is short, and that's pretty much it. This game was very fun to play, very interesting, and very unique, so it deserves what it got, and I'm proud to give it to them. And I know that Metal Gear has 2 other games coming up, Ground Zeroes and Metal Gear 5 or whatever it's called, the Phantom something, the Phantom Menace. So thank you for listening to this verdict on Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I'm Spraynpray1000, and I'll see you at the next one, which will be either Naruto Storm 3 or Womb Raider. Yes. An iPod or a 3D photo frame. They did have a little partnership with Apple going on in Metal Gear Solid 4. It was weird. And a MacBook and a Zone of the Enders. What the fuck? Apparently these boxes are fucking each other. I don't know what to think about that. Okay then. That was rather interesting, I have to say. Not every day I get to see a couple of FedEx boxes having sex. That's gruesome as hell. Look, the game's not counting him as dead. Can he hit me? Can he? This is horrible. Look at this. The game counts him as an enemy that's not dead, but he cannot hit me. He doesn't have the limbs to do it. This is fucked up. Seriously, Platinum Games, was this necessary? Look at this. He does not have the limbs with which to attack me. He barely even has the arm with which to crawl. Just put him out of his misery. Surprisingly, it took 2 more hits to kill him. Holy shit. I'm gonna be seeing that in my dreams tonight, man. Some poor dude with no legs, nothing below the waist, desperately trying to attack me.